The projector light felt like a spotlight burning into my skin. I stood at the front of the conference room, gripping my presentation clicker so hard my knuckles turned white. 12 faces stared back at me, some curious, others already bored. Then there was Mr. Dalton, my boss, sitting at the head of the table with his arms crossed and that familiar smirk playing at the corners of his mouth. I'd spent 3 months on this proposal. 3 months of late nights, weekend research, and endless revisions. The data was solid. The strategy was innovative. I knew it could transform our entire client retention approach. But as I clicked to my third slide, Mr. Dalton interrupted. "Wait, stop right there," he said, leaning forward. "Are you seriously suggesting we restructure our entire quarterly budget based on this?" His tone wasn't curious. It was mocking. I swallowed hard. "Yes, sir. The numbers show that if we reallocate just 15% of our marketing spend toward embarrassingly amateur," he cut in, shaking his head. A few people shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Someone coughed. "This is what happens when we let junior staff play strategist," he continued, looking around the room for validation. Couple of colleagues smirked. My face burned hot. "Next time, leave the thinking to the professionals," he finished, waving his hand dismissively. The room went silent. I stood there for what felt like an hour but was probably only 5 seconds. My throat tightened. My vision blurred slightly at the edges. I couldn't tell if I was about to cry or scream or both. Instead, I did neither. I clicked off the projector, gathered my papers with trembling hands, and walked out of that conference room with my head down. The hallway seemed endless. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead. My heels clicked against the tile floor, each step echoing my humiliation. I pushed through the restroom door and locked myself in the farthest stall. Only then did I let myself breathe. My hands were shaking so badly I had to press them against the cold metal divider. 3 months of work dismissed in 30 seconds. Called amateur in front of everyone who mattered. I thought about all those nights I'd stayed late while Dalton left at 5 sharp. All the research I'd compiled while he took credit for department wins at board meetings. All the times I'd smiled and nodded while he interrupted my ideas only to present them as his own a week later. The bathroom door opened. I heard 2 voices, Angela and Stephanie from accounting. "Did you see what just happened to her? Brutal. Dalton can be such a... Shoo, she might hear you." Their footsteps faded. I stayed in that stall for another 10 minutes. When I finally returned to my desk, my computer screen displayed 23 new emails. Most were routine work updates, but one stood out. The subject line read, "Today's presentation meeting recording." My stomach dropped. We recorded meetings for documentation purposes, but they were supposed to stay internal. Opened it. The email was from an anonymous sender, but attached was the video file from the conference room. Every word Dalton had said, every sneer, every colleague's uncomfortable laugh. I watched it once, then twice. Each viewing made my chest tighter. By the 3rd time, something shifted inside me. The humiliation began transforming into something colder, sharper. I saved the video to 3 different locations, including a personal cloud drive. Then I closed my laptop and sat in the quiet office, listening to keyboards clicking and phones ringing around me. The anger wasn't loud or explosive. It settled into my bones like winter frost. I thought about quitting right then, walking out and never looking back. But that would give Dalton exactly what he wanted. One less person who might challenge him. One less witness to his incompetence. Well, if I was leaving, it wouldn't be in shame. That evening I stayed late again. Not to work on company projects, but to start documenting everything I'd ignored for 2 years. I created a new folder on my personal laptop and titled it simply, Documentation. Inside I began organizing files by category. Emails where Dalton took credit for my work, meeting notes where he contradicted himself, project reports with inflated success metrics, and budget documents that didn't quite add up. The deeper I dug, the more patterns emerged. Dalton had a habit of manipulating numbers before board presentations. Nothing catastrophically fraudulent. just enough tweaking to make quarterly results look better than they actually were. He'd also been cutting corners on client deliverables, promising premium service while delivering basic packages and pocketing the difference through vendor kickbacks. I copied everything carefully, making sure to timestamp each file. By midnight, I had a folder containing 47 documents spanning 18 months. My eyes burned from screen glare, but I felt strangely calm. This wasn't about revenge yet. It was about protection. About making sure that if Dalton ever tried to throw me under the bus again, I'd have proof of who was really driving. The office cleaning crew arrived around 1 in the morning. I nodded to them, packed up my laptop, and headed home. On the drive back to my apartment, I kept replaying his words. Leave the thinking to the professionals. As if I wasn't one. As if my degree and experience meant nothing compared to his ego. The next morning, whispers filled the office like smoke. I arrived at my usual time, carrying my coffee and wearing my most neutral expression. But I could feel eyes following me as I walked to my desk. Angela approached first. Are you okay? She asked quietly, setting a hand on my cubicle wall. After yesterday, I mean. That was really harsh. Smiled. The kind of smile I'd perfected over years of swallowing frustration. I'm fine. Just a rough meeting. If you need anything, I appreciate it, I said, cutting her off gently. Really, I'm okay. She nodded and walked away, but I saw her exchange glances with Stephanie. By lunch, 3 more people had stopped by with similar sentiments. Poor thing. So unfair. Dalton's always been tough. Their pity felt worse than the original humiliation. But I accepted each concerned comment with grace, because I needed them to think I was defeated, wounded, retreating. Meanwhile, I spent my lunch hour in my car making a list. Not a revenge list, though it would eventually serve that purpose. It was a strategic inventory of everything Dalton valued. His reputation with the board, his relationship with key investors, his upcoming promotion to senior vice president, and the massive Henderson account he'd been trying to close for 6 months. That afternoon, Dalton called me into his office. I walked in calmly, notepad in hand, as if nothing had changed. He gestured to the chair across from his desk without looking up from his computer. Sit. Sat. He continued typing for another 30 seconds, a power play I'd seen him use countless times. Finally, he turned to face me. Look, he began, his tone suddenly softer. Yesterday was intense. Maybe I came on a bit strong. Waited. You're a hard worker, he continued. I see that. But you need to understand something. Leadership requires a certain toughness, a thick skin. He leaned back in his expensive leather chair. You're just not leadership material. Not yet anyway. Maybe not ever. And that's okay. Some people are built to support the vision, not create it. Every word was designed to sound like mentorship while actually being dismissal. I'd heard him use the same technique on others. I understand, I said quietly. Good. He smiled. I'm glad we're on the same page. Now I need you to pull together the Henderson account files. All correspondence, contracts, projections. I'm meeting with them Friday. Of course, I said. I'll have everything ready by tomorrow. That's what I like to hear. I left his office, returned to my desk, and began preparing the Henderson files. But I also made copies of everything. Every email, every contract, every single document. That evening, I did something I'd never done before. I reached out to a recruiter. Not just any recruiter, but Samuel Ortiz from Weston & Partners, the firm that handled placements for our biggest competitor, Northbridge Solutions. I'd met him once at an industry conference 2 years ago. He'd given me his card and said to call if I ever wanted to explore opportunities. I'd kept that card in my desk drawer, thinking I'd never use it. Now I pulled it out and sent a carefully worded email. Hi Samuel, we met briefly at the Marketing Innovation Summit in 2021. I'm currently exploring new opportunities and would love to connect over coffee if you have time. Best regards. Simple. Professional. Non-desperate. He responded within an hour. Great to hear from you. I remember our conversation. How about Thursday morning? There's a cafe near your office. Confirmed. Thursday was 2 days away. Plenty of time to prepare. That night, I updated my resume for the first time in 3 years. I listed every major project I'd actually completed, every strategy I'd developed, every client relationship I'd built, without Dalton's name attached to any of it. When I finished, I read through it twice. The person described in those pages was accomplished, innovative, strategic. Everything Dalton had told me I wasn't. I saved the document and allowed myself a small smile. Thursday morning arrived cold and gray. I dressed more carefully than usual, choosing my navy blazer and the pearl earrings my grandmother had given me. Confidence clothes. The cafe Samuel had suggested was small and quiet, tucked between a bookstore and a dry cleaner. He was already there when I arrived, sitting at a corner table with 2 coffees. I took a guess, he said, sliding one toward me. Vanilla latte. Perfect. We talked for nearly an hour. He asked about my current role, and I described it honestly but carefully. I didn't trash talk Dalton or the company. Instead, I focused on my accomplishments and my desire for an environment that valued innovation. Samuel listened intently, occasionally taking notes. Northbridge is actually building out a new client strategy division, he said eventually. They're looking for someone to lead it. Someone with fresh ideas and proven results. My heart jumped, but I kept my expression neutral. That sounds interesting. Would you be open to an interview? Yes. Great. I'll set something up. But I should mention, they're particularly interested in understanding how strategic approaches differ across companies. Not proprietary information, just general industry insights. He paused meaningfully. I understood what he was really asking. Information about Dalton's methods, about our client approaches, about vulnerabilities. I didn't answer directly. I'm always happy to share industry perspectives, I said carefully. We finished our coffees and parted ways professionally. Back at the office, I found Dalton in an unusually good mood. He was leaning against Angela's desk, laughing loudly at something she'd said. When he saw me, he straightened. There she is. I need those Henderson files. They're on your desk, I said. Already organized by date and category. He looked surprised. Efficient. Good. I returned to my cubicle and opened my email. There was a message from Samuel with an interview time, Monday at 10 o'clock. Confirmed immediately. The weekend passed slowly. I spent Saturday reviewing everything I knew about Northbridge Solutions. Their clients, their market position, their recent campaigns. By Sunday evening I felt prepared. But on Monday morning, just as I was getting ready to leave for the interview, Dalton sent an urgent message. Conference room. Bringing in the Henderson team early. My interview was in 45 minutes. The Henderson presentation would take at least an hour. I stared at my phone, weighing options. Then I typed back. I have a doctor's appointment at 10. Can we reschedule? 3 dots appeared, then disappeared. Then appeared again. Finally. No. This is priority. Reschedule your appointment. I felt my jaw tighten. But I responded professionally. Understood. I'll be right there. Then I texted Samuel, explaining the situation and asking to reschedule. He replied quickly. No problem. How about tomorrow same time? Relief flooded through me. Perfect. The Henderson presentation was a disaster, though Dalton would never admit it. He'd taken my carefully organized files and rearranged them into a confusing mess of slides that jumped between topics without clear transitions. The Henderson team, 3 executives from their marketing division, looked increasingly puzzled as Dalton talked in circles. At one point their lead director interrupted. I'm sorry, Mr. Dalton, but I'm not seeing how this approach differs from what you proposed 3 months ago. Dalton's smile tightened. Well, we've refined the strategy based on market research. Research we haven't seen, another executive added. I sat quietly in the corner, watching Dalton's confidence crack slightly. He glanced at me. Perhaps my associate can clarify. She helped compile the data. All eyes turned to me. I could have rescued him. I had all the information memorized. Instead, I flipped through my notebook slowly, as if searching for something. "I'm sorry," I said after a long pause. "I don't have those specific metrics with me. They were in the supplementary documents." Dalton's face reddened. "What supplementary documents?" "The ones I mentioned in my email Friday. I asked if you wanted me to include the quarterly comparison analysis. I hadn't sent any such email." He couldn't prove I had or hadn't without checking his inbox right there. The Henderson team exchanged glances. After they left, promising to review options and get back to us, Dalton exploded. He called me into his office and shut the door with more force than necessary. "What the hell was that?" he demanded. I remained calm. "I'm sorry, I don't understand. You made me look incompetent in front of our biggest potential client." I answered their questions honestly. "I didn't have the supplementary data. Because you never prepared it. I offered to include it. You must have missed my email." His face was scarlet now. "Get out. And don't come back until you remember how to do your job properly." I left without another word. Back at my desk, I opened my personal laptop and added a new document to my folder. Henderson Meeting Notes, May 12th. I described everything that had happened, including Dalton's outburst. Then I forwarded the scheduled interview confirmation from Samuel to my personal email, just in case Dalton tried to block my calendar. The rest of the day passed in cold silence. Colleagues avoided eye contact. Angela whispered something to Stephanie that made them both glance my way. I ignored all of it and focused on routine tasks. At 5 o'clock sharp, I packed up and left. That evening, I practiced interview answers in front of my bathroom mirror. "What's your greatest strength?" "Leadership and strategic innovation." "Why are you leaving your current position?" "Seeking an environment that values collaborative growth." Tuesday's interview with Northbridge went better than I'd hoped. The hiring manager, a sharp woman named Victoria Preston, spent the first 20 minutes asking about my background. Then she got specific. "Walk me through how you'd approach a client retention strategy for a mid-sized tech company losing market share to younger competitors." I'd literally written that exact proposal, the one Dalton had humiliated me over. I spent 15 minutes outlining the framework. Budget reallocation, targeted demographic research, phased implementation, measurable quarterly benchmarks. Victoria took notes throughout. When I finished, she set down her pen. "That's exactly the kind of thinking we need here. How soon could you start?" My heart raced. "I'd need to give 2 weeks' notice." "Understandable. We'll prepare an offer letter by end of week." He paused. "I should mention we've had our eye on your company's approach to client relations, particularly the Henderson account pitch." I kept my expression neutral. "It's an interesting opportunity." "Indeed. Though from what I hear, the presentation didn't go as planned." I chose my words carefully. "Every pitch has challenges." Victoria smiled. "Of course. Well, we'd love to have someone with your insight on our team." We shook hands, and I left feeling lighter than I had in months. But I knew the real challenge was still ahead, resigning without burning bridges while also ensuring Dalton's house of cards started collapsing. The offer letter arrived Friday afternoon. Senior Strategy Director. Salary nearly double what I was currently making. Full benefits. Corner office. I read it 3 times, then saved it to every device I owned. But I didn't tell anyone yet. Instead, I spent the weekend finalizing my documentation folder. Every questionable decision Dalton had made. Every inflated metric. Every client complaint he'd buried. Every expense report with suspicious charges. I organized everything chronologically, created a table of contents, and compiled supporting evidence for each claim. The finished document was 63 pages long. On Sunday night, I drafted 2 letters. The first was my resignation, professional and brief. The second was addressed to the board of directors, outlining concerns about financial irregularities and ethical violations. I didn't include specifics in the second letter, just enough to trigger an internal investigation. Monday morning I arrived early. The office was still mostly empty when I printed both letters on company letterhead. I placed the resignation on Dalton's desk. The other letter went into an envelope addressed to the board chairman. I dropped it in the internal mail system where it would be delivered by end of day. Then I went to my desk and began transferring my personal files. Not company property, just my own research notes, templates I'd created, and contact lists I'd built. By 9 o'clock my work computer was clean. My personal laptop contained everything I needed. Dalton arrived at 9:30, later than usual. I watched through the glass walls as he entered his office, set down his briefcase, and noticed the letter on his desk. He picked it up, scanned it quickly, then his head snapped toward my cubicle. He stormed out. My office. Now. I walked in calmly. He was holding my resignation letter like it was covered in poison. What is this? My 2 weeks' notice. You can't be serious. I met his eyes steadily. I am. I've accepted a position elsewhere. Where? Northbridge Solutions. His face went pale, then red, then pale again. You're going to our competitor. I'm pursuing a better opportunity. You signed a non-compete agreement. I reviewed it with a lawyer. My new role doesn't violate any terms. I won't be working with overlapping clients or sharing proprietary information. That last part was technically true. I wouldn't share proprietary information. I'd simply help Northbridge understand where their competitor was weak. Dalton's hands were shaking. After everything I've done for you. Everything you've done. The words came out sharper than I intended. You humiliated me in front of the entire team. You've taken credit for my work for 2 years. You've blocked every promotion I've tried for. That's not. I have documentation, I said quietly. Every email, every project, every instance. The color drained from his face completely now. You wouldn't. I'm not interested in burning bridges. But I also won't let you rewrite history. We stared at each other for a long moment. Finally he said, "Get out." I spent the next 2 weeks training my replacement, a nervous junior analyst named Kevin who kept apologizing for taking my position. "You're not taking anything," I assured him. "This is an opportunity for you. Take it." Meant it. Kevin was smart and hardworking. He deserved better than to be Dalton's next target. On my second to last day, Angela invited me to lunch. We went to the small Italian place across the street. After we ordered, she leaned forward. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course. Why now? Why leave right when everything's finally stabilizing?" Smiled. "Things aren't stabilizing. They're falling apart. You just can't see it yet." She looked confused. "What do you mean?" I didn't elaborate. But that afternoon, the board chairman called an emergency meeting. Word spread quickly through the office. Dalton was being summoned upstairs. His face was gray as he passed my desk. I kept working, typing routine emails, organizing final handoff documents. 2 hours later, he returned. His collar was loosened, his usually perfect hair disheveled. He didn't look at anyone, just went straight to his office and closed the door. Angela appeared at my cubicle. "What's happening?" Shrugged. "No idea. But I did know. The board had received my letter. They were starting to ask questions. By end of day, the finance director had been called in. Then the legal team. The whispers intensified. Something big was happening. And everyone knew it involved Dalton. My last day arrived quietly. I packed my few personal items into a small box. A coffee mug, some photos, the award I'd won for client retention 2 years ago. Dalton had accepted it on my behalf because I'd been out sick that day. He never gave me the actual trophy. I found it in his office cabinet 6 months later. Now I was taking it back. Dalton was noticeably absent all morning. According to Angela, he'd been in back-to-back meetings with legal since 8 o'clock. I completed my final handoff documents and emailed them to Kevin. At 11, Victoria from Northbridge called. "How's your last day going?" "Quietly," I said. "Good. 'Cause I wanted to give you a heads up. We officially won the Henderson account this morning." My breath caught. "They switched. Called us yesterday. Apparently, they weren't impressed with your previous company's presentation. They'd heard about our client strategy division and wanted to discuss options." She paused meaningfully. "They specifically asked if you'd be involved." I couldn't help smiling. "I'll make sure they're well taken care of." After hanging up, I sat at my desk for a moment. The Henderson account was worth $2.4 million annually. Losing it would devastate Dalton's quarterly numbers. It would also raise serious questions about his leadership capability. At noon, I sent a final email to the team. "Thank you for 2 great years. Wishing you all the best." Then I logged out of my computer for the last time. I was walking toward the elevator, box in hand, when Dalton's office door flew open. He looked terrible. His shirt was wrinkled, his eyes bloodshot. "You did this," he said, his voice low and dangerous. Turned slowly. "Did what?" "The Henderson account. The board investigation. All of it." People were watching now, pretending to work while clearly listening. I set down my box and faced him fully. "I resigned. That's all." "You sabotaged me." "No." My voice was calm but firm. "You sabotaged yourself. I just stopped covering for you." His face twisted with rage. "You think you're so smart. You think Northbridge won't figure out what kind of person you really are. The kind who does actual work instead of taking credit for other people's." The words hung in the air. Someone gasped softly. Dalton stepped closer, and for a moment, I thought he might actually try something physical. But then the elevator dinged. Victoria stepped out, along with a man I didn't recognize. "Sorry to interrupt," Victoria said smoothly. "I'm here to escort our new director for her first day orientation." She turned to Dalton. "You must be Mr. Dalton. I'm Victoria Preston from Northbridge. This is our legal counsel. We're here to discuss the Henderson transition." Dalton's face went from red to white. "What? Didn't you get our email? We'll need all Henderson-related files transferred by end of week. Standard procedure when a client moves firms." I picked up my box and stepped into the elevator with Victoria. The doors closed on Dalton's stunned expression. As soon as we started descending, Victoria grinned. "Perfect timing. Was that planned?" "Yes." The legal counsel part was. "I figured you might need a dramatic exit." She wasn't wrong. At Northbridge, everything was different. Clean, modern offices. Collaborative spaces. People who smiled and meant it. My corner office had floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. My name was already on the door. I spent the afternoon in meetings, learning systems, and meeting team members. Everyone was welcoming, professional, excited to have me aboard. At 5 o'clock, Victoria stopped by. "How's day 1? "Surreal," I admitted. "In a good way." "Excellent. Oh, and I should mention, the board at your old company has opened a formal investigation into financial discrepancies. Apparently, someone submitted detailed documentation." I kept my expression neutral. "Is that so?" She smiled knowingly. "Completely anonymous, of course, but very thorough. They're calling it the most comprehensive whistleblower report they've ever received." I didn't respond, but something must have shown on my face. "Don't worry," Victoria said. "Whistleblower protections are extensive. And you're not there anymore anyway." After she left, I stood at my window, watching the city lights begin to glow. Somewhere across town, Dalton was probably still in meetings, trying to explain away years of manipulation. The thought didn't give me the satisfaction I'd expected. Just a quiet sense of justice. The investigation moved faster than anyone anticipated. Within a week, auditors had uncovered the vendor kickbacks. Within 2 weeks, they'd found the inflated performance metrics. By week 3, the board had suspended Dalton pending further review. I learned all this through Angela, who'd started texting me regularly. "It's chaos here," she wrote. "Kevin's overwhelmed. Half the team is looking for new jobs. And Dalton's lawyer showed up yesterday." I replied carefully. "That sounds stressful. How are you holding up?" "Honestly, kind of relieved. We all knew something was wrong, but nobody wanted to say anything." That message stayed with me. All those people who'd witnessed Dalton's behavior, who'd benefited from my work while he took credit, who'd seen the red flags. None of them had spoken up. I understood why. Speaking up meant risking your job, your reputation, your future. But silence had its own cost. It enabled people like Dalton to keep hurting others. At Northbridge, I was settling into my role with surprising ease. The Henderson account was thriving under my direct management. They'd even expanded their contract by 30%. My team was small but talented, and they actually listened when I spoke. No interruptions, no dismissive looks, just genuine collaboration. I started sleeping better at night. A month after my departure, Angela called instead of texting. "Did you see the announcement?" she asked. "What announcement?" "Dalton's been terminated. Effective immediately. They're even pursuing legal action for the financial irregularities." I sat down slowly. "When did this happen?" "This morning. Security escorted him out. It was brutal. Everyone watched." I felt a strange mix of emotions. Vindication, yes, but also something sadder. Dalton had built his entire identity on his position, his power, his reputation. Now it was all gone. "How's everyone handling it?" Yes. Mixed reactions. Some people are glad. Others are nervous about what comes next. I pause. "They're interviewing for his replacement. Word is they want someone from outside the company. Someone with a track record of ethical leadership." "That's probably smart. They should hire you back." I laughed. "I'm exactly where I want to be." We talked for a few more minutes before hanging up. That evening I got a LinkedIn request from an unfamiliar name. When I opened it, my stomach dropped. It was Dalton. Not from his professional account, but a new personal one. He'd sent a message with a request. "We need to talk." I stared at those 4 words for a long time. Then I declined the request without responding. Some conversations weren't worth having. 2 months into my new role, I was invited to speak at an industry conference. The same conference where Dalton had been a featured speaker for the past 5 years. The organizers wanted me to discuss innovative approaches to client retention. I accepted immediately. The presentation was scheduled for a Friday morning. I spent weeks preparing, refining every slide, practicing every transition. This time there would be no interruptions. No mockery. Just my ideas presented clearly and confidently. The morning of the conference, I arrived early. The venue was a hotel ballroom with rows of chairs facing a raised stage. Professional lighting. A large screen for slides. About 200 people would attend. As I was checking my laptop connection, someone approached. "Excuse me, are you the speaker for the retention strategy session?" Turned. It was one of the Henderson executives, the one who'd questioned Dalton during that disastrous presentation. "Yes, that's me." His face lit up with recognition. "You're from Northbridge now. I thought your name seemed familiar." We chatted briefly about how the Henderson account was performing. He seemed genuinely impressed. "You've exceeded every benchmark we set. Honestly, switching firms was the best decision we made." Those words meant more than he probably realized. At 10 o'clock, the session began. I walked onto the stage, clicked on my presentation and started speaking. My voice was steady. My points were clear. The presentation lasted 45 minutes. I covered everything. The importance of data-driven decisions, the value of authentic client relationships, the necessity of ethical leadership in building trust. When I finished, the applause was genuine and sustained. During the Q&A session, hands shot up immediately. "How do you balance innovation with proven strategies? What metrics do you prioritize when measuring client satisfaction?" How do you build team buy-in for new approaches? I answered each question thoroughly, drawing on real experiences. The session ran 15 minutes over because people kept asking more questions. Afterward, at least a dozen attendees approached me with business cards and follow-up requests. As I was packing up my laptop, I noticed someone standing at the back of the room. My heart jumped. It was Dalton. He looked older somehow. His suit was less expensive than the ones he used to wear. His posture was slumped. He waited until everyone else had left, then walked slowly toward the stage. "That was a good presentation," he said quietly. I didn't respond immediately. "I mean it," he continued. "Really good. The kind of work I always knew you were capable of." "Thank you." The words felt strange in my mouth. We stood in awkward silence. "I lost everything," he said finally. "The job, the reputation, the respect. Nobody will hire me now." I wanted to feel triumphant. Instead, I just felt tired. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. He looked down at his hands. "Because you were right. About all of it. I took credit for work I didn't do. I manipulated numbers to look better. I treated people badly because it made me feel powerful." He paused. "And when you stood up to me, I tried to destroy you instead of learning from you." It was the closest thing to an apology I'd ever heard from him. "What do you want from me?" I asked. "A reference. Forgiveness." "Nothing," he said. "I just wanted you to know that you didn't imagine it. Everything you thought about me was true. And I'm sorry." He turned to leave, then stopped. "For what it's worth, you deserved better. You always did." After he left, I stood alone in the empty ballroom. The apology hadn't changed anything. It hadn't erased the humiliation or the years of stolen credit. But it had confirmed something important. None of it had been my fault. I hadn't been too sensitive or too ambitious or too anything. I'd been competent, skilled, and undervalued by someone who felt threatened by that. I packed up my things and left the venue. Outside, the sun was bright and warm. I had lunch plans with Victoria to discuss expansion opportunities for my division. I had a team waiting for me back at the office. I had work that mattered and people who respected it. Dalton's apology was just a footnote now. 6 months later, my division broke company records. We'd retained 94% of clients, acquired 8 major new accounts, and increased revenue by 42%. The executive team was thrilled. They threw a celebration dinner at an upscale restaurant downtown. The whole department attended, along with several board members. During dessert, the CEO stood to make a toast. When we created this division, we took a risk on a new approach. But more importantly, we took a chance on someone whose vision matched our values. He turned toward me. "Your leadership has exceeded every expectation. You've built not just a successful team, but a culture of innovation and integrity. That's rare and it's valuable." He raised his glass. "To new beginnings and to leaders who earn respect instead of demanding it." Everyone cheered. Victoria leaned over and whispered, "They're going to offer you a VP position. Just so you know." My eyes widened. "Seriously?" "Completely. They'll make it official next week." I tried to keep my composure, but inside I was soaring. Later that evening, as I was leaving the restaurant, I checked my phone. There was an email notification from a business magazine. The subject line read, "Interview request. Rising leaders in strategic innovation." They wanted to feature me in their quarterly spotlight series. The same series that had featured Dalton 3 years ago when he was riding high on my work. I wrote back that night and agreed to the interview. It was published 6 weeks later with a headline, "From Conference Room Humiliation to Industry Leader, One Woman's Strategic Rise." The article detailed my career trajectory, my approach to client relations, and my philosophy on ethical leadership. It mentioned my previous company only briefly, noting that I'd moved to an environment better aligned with my values. Dalton wasn't named, but anyone in the industry could read between the lines. The response was overwhelming. My LinkedIn inbox filled with messages from young professionals asking for advice. Conference organizers requested my participation. Even a few universities reached out about guest lecturing opportunities. One message stood out. It was from a woman who'd attended my conference presentation. "I was in an almost identical situation with my boss," she wrote. "Your story gave me the courage to document everything and report it. They investigated and he's been demoted. I'm taking over his role next month. Thank you for showing me it was possible." That message made everything worth it. The humiliation, the fear, the risk of speaking up. Because it hadn't just been about me. It had been about showing others that you didn't have to accept mistreatment. That quiet strength could be more powerful than loud aggression. That building something real would always outlast building something on lies. Kept that message saved. And sometimes when I sat in my office overlooking the city, I'd remember that conference room. The burning shame. The trembling hands. The moment I decided I wouldn't let someone else's cruelty define my worth. Dalton had called my work embarrassingly amateur. But in the end, the only thing embarrassing was how much credit he'd needed to steal. Because real professionals didn't need to tear others down. They just did the work, built the relationships, and let the results speak for themselves.